fired because a 72-year-old woman slapped me across the face at a company dinner. That's what I tell people when they ask why I left Pinnacle Industries after 23 years. It sounds like a joke until you see the scar her ring left near my left eye. My name is Garrison Wells. I'm 48 years old, and I thought I understood how corporate politics worked. Turns out I didn't know anything. The whole thing started with red wine and ended with me sitting in my kitchen 3 days later, staring at a promotion offer I never saw coming. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a simple accident at a company dinner turned into the biggest upheaval Pinnacle Industries had seen in decades. The dinner was supposed to celebrate our acquisition of Delta Manufacturing. Big win for the company, bigger win for our young CEO Oliver Hayes, who'd been pushing this deal for months against plenty of resistance from the old guard. The kind of celebration where they rent out the private dining room at the Grandview Hotel, the one with crystal chandeliers and waiters who refill your water before you notice it's empty. I showed up in my best suit, the navy one my wife bought me for my promotion to senior operations director 5 years back. Found my nameplate at table 7. Right between Rachel Morrison from HR and some consultant I'd never met. Not the executive table where Oliver held court. Not the back corner where they stick the accountants either. Middle management seating, exactly where a guy like me belongs after 2 decades of keeping the supply chain running while other people take credit for the numbers. Oliver was working the room like he owned it, which technically he did. 32 years old, Harvard MBA, perfect teeth, the kind of jawline you see in corporate headshots. The kind of guy who calls everyone champ and remembers your wedding anniversary, but forgets you've been running the logistics department since before he could drive a car. He'd inherited the CEO position when his father stepped down last year, and he'd been making changes ever since. Some good, some questionable, all designed to put his stamp on a company that had been running fine without his input for 3 decades. The acquisition was his baby from start to finish. Delta Manufacturing made components we'd been buying from 3 different suppliers, and Oliver figured we could cut costs by bringing production in-house. Smart move, actually. The kind of vertical integration that would save us maybe 8% on materials costs and give us better quality control. I'd run the numbers myself when he asked for a logistics assessment. The math worked even if his presentation to the board made it sound like his idea instead of basic business sense. That's when I noticed her. Small woman, early 70s, sitting at the head table like she belonged there. Designer dress in deep green pearls that caught the light when she moved, the kind of posture that says old money and lots of it. She had to be somebody's wife or mother, but she carried herself like she ran the place. Her eyes swept the room with the calculating look of someone taking inventory, and when they landed on our table, I got the distinct feeling we'd been found wanting. The pre-dinner mingling was the usual corporate theater, handshakes, small talk about the weather, careful conversations that revealed nothing while sounding engaged. I stuck to my tried and true strategy, find the people I'd worked with for years, ask safe questions about weekend plans or how their kids were doing, avoid anything that might require an opinion about company direction. After 23 years at Pinnacle, I'd learned that the safest position for someone like me was quietly competent and largely invisible. Rachel Morrison did her usual welcome speech when they called us to sit. Something about synergy and growth opportunities, team integration, and exciting horizons ahead. The standard corporate cheerleading that means budgets are tight, and some people are going to lose their jobs, but we're all supposed to pretend this is about opportunity rather than cost cutting. Glasses clinked, conversations started up in little clusters around each table, and the waiters began their careful dance between chairs with the first course. I focused on my safe zones, small talk with Jim from procurement about his new grandson. Questions to Sarah from quality control about her vacation plans. The kind of conversations that fill time without creating problems. The consultant next to me turned out to be from McKinsey, brought in to assess our operational efficiency metrics, corporate speak for finding out who they could fire without the whole place falling apart. I made a mental note to be extra careful around him. The food was what you'd expect from a hotel event. Expensive, but forgettable. Chicken that tasted like it had been cooked 3 hours ago and kept warm. Vegetables cut into fancy shapes that didn't make them taste any better, and bread rolls that were somehow both too soft and too crusty at the same time. The kind of meal that costs $85 per plate and leaves you wishing you'd grabbed a sandwich on the way home. About halfway through the main course, Oliver stood up to give his speech about the Delta acquisition. Standard corporate rhetoric about market positioning and strategic advantages, peppered with enough jargon to make it sound sophisticated. He talked about efficiency gains and cost synergies, about leveraging our core competencies and optimizing our supply chain infrastructure. All things that sounded impressive to people who didn't actually run supply chains for a living. What he didn't mention was that the real work, figuring out how to integrate Delta's production schedules with our delivery commitments, mapping their quality standards against our specifications, identifying which of their suppliers we could keep and which ones we'd need to replace. All of that was happening in departments like mine, by people like me who wouldn't get mentioned in the press release. But that was fine. That's how it always worked. The executives got the credit, the middle managers did the work, and everybody pretended that was a fair division of labor. I'd made my peace with that arrangement years ago. The problem started when I got up to use the restroom. Simple enough operation, push back from table, navigate around chairs, head for the hallway. Should have been routine. I'd done it 1,000 times at 1,000 different corporate events. But timing is everything, and my timing that night was about as bad as it gets. As I stood, a waiter appeared with a bottle of red wine, moving fast to refill glasses before the main course plates got cleared. He was young, maybe 22, the kind of kid who takes these jobs to pay for college and probably goes home every night with stories about rich people and their weird habits. He was hustling between tables with the focused intensity of someone who knew his tip depended on staying invisible while being everywhere at once. At the exact same moment, Oliver materialized at my elbow. It was like he had radar for awkward moments. "Garrison," he said in that bright, performative voice he uses when other people might be listening, "have you met my mother yet?" That's when everything clicked into place. The woman at the head table, the one who'd been surveying the room like a general reviewing troops, that was Patricia Hayes, Oliver's mother, which meant she wasn't just some board member's wife, she was family, she was untouchable. I turned half-blocked by my chair and the table edge, and saw her trying to stand at the head table. She was smaller than she'd looked sitting down, but there was something about the way she moved that demanded attention. The waiter stepped left around a businessman who was gesticulating with his fork. I stepped right to give Oliver room to introduce us properly. Someone behind me, the McKinsey consultant, I think pushed back from the table to let another waiter through with a tray. For a split second, we were all moving in slow motion. I could see the waiter's eyes go wide as he realized he was caught between bodies with a full bottle of wine. I could see Oliver reaching out like he was going to steady something. I could see Mrs. Hayes looking up at me with those sharp, evaluating eyes. My elbow caught the waiter's arm just above the wrist, the bottle tilted. Physics took over. Red wine arsed through the air in a perfect, inevitable curve. It seemed to hang there for a moment, dark and heavy against the crystal and candlelight, before gravity pulled it down across Mrs. Hayes' chest and shoulder. The expensive green fabric absorbed it like a sponge, the stain spreading outward in an irregular bloom. A few drops hit her face, one landing just below her left eye and sliding down like a tear made of wine. The sound the room made wasn't quite silence. It was more like the intake of breath before a scream. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Even the background music from the hotel's sound system seemed to fade. "Jesus," I said, already reaching for napkins from our table. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry." "Let me help." She moved faster than I expected for someone her age. Her hand came up in a sharp, controlled arc and connected with my left cheek, with the sound of a book slamming shut. The impact snapped my head sideways and sent a shock of pain through my jaw. Her ring, some kind of stone setting, diamond or sapphire, caught the skin just below my eye and opened a cut that immediately started bleeding. The silence that followed was complete. Not restaurant quiet, not conversation lull. Complete, absolute silence, like someone had pressed a mute button on the entire room. My cheek burned with the kind of heat that promised swelling. I could taste blood where I'd bitten the inside of my mouth. The napkins were still in my hand, useless now for anything except catching the drops of blood that were starting to fall. "You clumsy old fool," she said, and her voice carried to every corner of that private dining room. Not shouting, she didn't need to shout. The silence was so complete that her normal speaking voice might as well have been a bullhorn. "Look what you've done. Do you have any idea what this dress cost?" The waiter stood frozen, bottle still in his hand, eyes wide with the kind of terror that comes from watching your night go from routine to disaster in 3 seconds. Other waiters had stopped moving, unsure whether to help or flee. The McKinsey consultant was staring at me like I'd just provided him with a perfect case study in operational failure. "I'm sorry," I said again, and my voice sounded wrong in my own ears, thick and uncertain. "It was an accident." "I didn't see. Of course you didn't see," she snapped, and there was something in her tone that cut deeper than the slap. "Men like you never see anything past your own nose." Deadweight employees stumbling around, breaking things, making messes for other people to clean up. That's when I understood this wasn't just about spilled wine. This was about something bigger, something that had been building for longer than the few seconds since the accident. The way she said men like you, it carried weight, history, the kind of accumulated disdain that doesn't develop overnight. Mom, Oliver said, finally finding his voice. He stepped between us, but his movement was uncertain, like he wasn't sure whose side he was supposed to be on. His face had gone pale, and I could see him calculating the social and professional cost of what had just happened. It was an accident. Garrison's been with us for over 20 years. He didn't mean don't defend him, she cut him off, and the authority in her voice made it clear who really held power in their family dynamic. If this is the kind of person you're keeping on payroll, maybe that's why your numbers look the way they do. Clumsy old dinosaurs who should have retired years ago instead of taking up space that could go to competent people. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't anger speaking. This was calculation. She was using the accident as a launching pad for something she'd been thinking about for a while. The wine spill was just an excuse. Around the room, I could see people frozen in their chairs, some leaning forward slightly like they were watching a car accident unfold. The executives at the head table were studying their wine glasses with sudden fascination. A few of the younger employees looked genuinely shocked. They'd never seen anything like this at a corporate event. But the older hands, the people who'd been around long enough to understand power dynamics, they just looked uncomfortable. They knew they were witnessing something that would have consequences. Rachel Morrison from HR appeared at my elbow, like she'd been teleported there. She had that smooth, professional expression that HR people practice in the mirror, the one that says everything is under control even when it obviously isn't. Garrison, she murmured in the kind of voice you'd use with someone who was having a medical emergency. Let's step outside for a moment. I looked at her, then at Oliver, then at Mrs. Hayes, who was now examining the stain on her dress with the kind of attention a surgeon might give to an incision. The whole room was waiting to see what would happen next. I can help clean that up. I started, but Mrs. Hayes cut me off with a look that could have frozen water. No, she said, sharp and final. He's done quite enough damage for one evening. Rachel's fingers closed around my arm. Not rough, but with the kind of professional firmness that doesn't invite discussion. Come on, she said, and her smile was aimed at the room, not at me. Let's get you cleaned up. The walk to the door felt like it took forever. Every eye in the room followed us, and I could feel the weight of their stares like a physical thing pressing against my back. Nobody said anything. What was there to say? But I could practically hear them composing the stories they'd tell when they got home. The night Garrison Wells lost his mind and attacked the CEO's mother with a bottle of wine. In the hallway outside the dining room, the lighting was harsh and fluorescent. Nothing like the warm ambiance they'd paid extra for inside. My cheek throbbed in rhythm with my heartbeat, and when I touched it gingerly, my fingertips came away with a smear of blood. The cut from her ring wasn't deep, but it was going to leave a mark. Rachel guided me to a small alcove near the elevators, away from the main traffic flow. She was already in full damage control mode, her expression carefully neutral, like she was running through a mental checklist of corporate crisis management protocols. I'm really sorry about what happened, I said, because it seemed like something that needed to be said. It was a complete accident. The waiter and I just Garrison, she interrupted gently but firmly. This isn't the place to process this. Emotions are running very high right now, and Mrs. Hayes is extremely upset. Mrs. Hayes, I repeated, testing the name. It still felt strange, connecting that sharp-voiced woman to Oliver, to the company, to the power structure I'd been navigating for over 2 decades. She's Oliver's mother, Rachel clarified, as if I hadn't figured that out. She's also a significant shareholder in the company. You understand how delicate this situation is. I did understand. That was the problem. In the corporate world, understanding how delicate things are is usually the first step toward accepting that you're expendable. The waiter bumped into me, I said quietly. We both moved at the same time. It was just terrible timing. I hear you, Rachel said. In that particular way, HR people say I hear you when they're simultaneously hearing you and calculating liability exposure. But I also need you to understand that from her perspective, it looked very different. She's 72 years old, Garrison. She felt threatened by your proximity, by what she perceived as aggressive movement toward her. Aggressive? The word tasted bitter in my mouth. I was apologizing. I never even raised my voice. Rachel's eyes flicked to the cut on my face, then away. I saw what happened with the physical contact, and I want you to know that I'm documenting everything. But right now, the priority has to be de-escalation. De-escalation, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. She hit me in front of the entire company leadership, and I'm the one who needs to be de-escalated. Mrs. Hayes feels that you invaded her personal space. Rachel continued, her voice taking on that measured cadence they teach in conflict resolution seminars. Given her age and the circumstances, she interpreted your actions as potentially threatening, and she reacted defensively. I stared at her. So, her hitting me was self-defense, but my apologizing was aggressive. I'm not making judgments about right or wrong, she said quickly. I'm explaining how the situation is being perceived by the principals involved. The principals, not Mrs. Hayes and you. The principals, like I was some kind of supporting character in my own professional catastrophe. What are you asking me to do? I said. I'm asking you to go home for the evening, she said. Let everyone cool down. We'll sort this out on Monday morning when heads are clearer. You're sending me home. I'm suggesting that your continued presence here tonight might make it harder for people to enjoy the rest of the celebration, she said. Mrs. Hayes is very shaken up, and having you in the room is only going to keep tensions elevated. I looked through the glass doors back toward the dining room. The party seemed to be getting back into swing, conversations resuming, waiters moving again, the crisis apparently contained now that the problem had been removed from the premises. She assaulted me, I said quietly. I understand how it feels that way, Rachel replied, and we will absolutely address that on Monday. But right now, I need you to help me manage this situation by taking some space. By taking some space. I repeated her words slowly, letting them settle. After 23 years with this company, after building the logistics systems that make half our operations possible, I'm being asked to take some space so that the woman who hit me can enjoy her dinner in peace. Rachel's professional mask slipped just a fraction. Garrison, please don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm trying to protect everyone here. Protect everyone. I nodded, including me. Her silence was answer enough. Fine, I said finally. I'll go. Thank you, she said, and the relief in her voice was unmistakable. I'll call you first thing Monday morning, and we'll work through this together. She started to turn back toward the dining room, then stopped. If anyone asks, I'm going to tell them you weren't feeling well and decided to head home early. Okay? Sure, I said. Whatever makes the story easier to swallow. She didn't respond to that, just gave me a tight smile and disappeared back through the glass doors, leaving me alone in the bright hallway with my bleeding face and my growing understanding of exactly where I stood in the Pinnacle Industries hierarchy. I walked toward the lobby, past the front desk and the lounge area where a few hotel guests were having quiet drinks and probably wondering why a man in a business suit was walking through their evening with blood on his face. The revolving door felt heavier than usual, like it was reluctant to let me out. In the parking lot, the night air was cold and sharp. I sat in my car for a few minutes before starting the engine, watching through the hotel windows as the celebration continued without me. From out there, it looked warm and civilized, like the kind of corporate gathering that builds careers and strengthens relationships. That's when I noticed him. An older man, maybe early 70s, standing near the hotel entrance with his hands in his pockets. He wasn't rushing to get inside, wasn't checking his phone or looking for a taxi. He was just standing there, watching me through the windshield of my car, with the kind of focused attention that made me uncomfortable. I'd seen him at the dinner, sitting alone at a corner table, distinguished-looking silver hair, expensive suit, but nothing flashy. I'd assumed he was someone's father or maybe a retired board member making a courtesy appearance. But the way he was looking at me now suggested he'd seen more than just the wine spill and the slap. He'd been watching the whole thing unfold with the careful observation of someone who understood exactly what he was seeing. Our eyes met across the parking lot. He didn't wave or nod or give any sign of recognition, just stood there, studying me like I was a problem he was working through in his head. After a long moment, he turned and walked back into the hotel, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the taste of blood in my mouth. I drove home through empty streets, my reflection in the rearview mirror showing the cut on my face and the beginning of what would probably be a spectacular bruise by morning. My wife was already asleep when I got home. She'd skipped the dinner, claiming a headache but probably just avoiding another evening of corporate small talk. I was grateful not to have to explain what had happened. Not yet. I stood in the bathroom, cleaning the cut with antiseptic and trying to process what had just occurred. 23 years of steady performance, of quiet competence, of staying in my lane and doing my job well. And it had all been wiped out by 30 seconds of bad timing and spilled wine. But what bothered me more than the injustice of it was the calculation I'd seen in Mrs. Hayes' eyes. This wasn't just anger over a ruined dress. This was opportunity. She'd used the accident as a launching pad for something bigger, something that felt planned even if the moment itself was spontaneous. The next morning brought a different kind of silence. No early morning emails about logistics coordination. No calls from suppliers with questions about delivery schedules. My phone, usually active from 6 a.m. onward, sat quiet on the nightstand, like it had forgotten my number. I spent Saturday morning doing yard work trying to keep my hands busy while my mind churned through the events of the night before. The bruise had indeed developed into something impressive, a purple-blue crescent that ran from my cheekbone to my jaw, with the small cut from her ring sitting right in the middle like an exclamation point. Monday morning came with the weight of inevitability. I showed up at the office 15 minutes early, which was probably stupid since I already knew this wasn't going to be a normal day. The security guard nodded when I swiped my badge, but his eyes lingered on the bruise covering half my face. Word had traveled fast through the Pinnacle Industries grapevine. Rachel was waiting outside conference room B when I reached my floor, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. She had her clipboard and her professional smile, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "Morning, Garrison," she said, like Friday night existed in some alternate universe. "Morning, Rachel. Let's sit down and talk through what happened." The conversation that followed was exactly what I expected. Rachel had spoken to several attendees from the dinner, but somehow none of them included the waiter who'd been right there when it happened. She'd taken statements from people at nearby tables, but their recollections all seemed to focus on my aggressive movement toward Mrs. Hayes rather than the collision that caused the spill in the first place. "I understand your frustration," she said after I'd given my version of events for the third time, "but we have to consider all perspectives here. Mrs. Hayes feels genuinely threatened by what she perceived as hostile behavior." "Hostile behavior," I repeated. "That's what we're calling an apology now." Given the high-profile nature of this incident and the strong emotional response from a major shareholder, she continued, reading from what was obviously a prepared script. "Leadership has decided to place you on administrative leave, pending a full review of the situation." There it was, the sword I'd been waiting for since Friday night. "Administrative leave," I said. "For how long, pending review?" "We should have a resolution within the week." She asked for my badge and company phone, and I handed them over without argument. 23 years reduced to 2 pieces of plastic and metal sliding across a conference table. "I want you to know this isn't punitive," she said, "but we both knew that was corporate speak for this is absolutely punitive, but we can't admit it." Walking out through the main office was like navigating a gauntlet. People suddenly became very interested in their computer screens when I passed. Conversations died mid-sentence. A few colleagues gave me sympathetic looks, but nobody said anything. In corporate America, being placed on administrative leave is like having a contagious disease. People are afraid it might be catching. At the elevators, I pressed the down button and tried to process what had just happened. 2 decades of building supply chain systems, of solving logistical nightmares, of quietly making other people's jobs easier, and it all came down to this. Escorted out like a security risk because I'd spilled wine on the wrong person. "Garrison," I turned to find a man in his early 70s standing behind me, the same one who'd been watching me in the parking lot Friday night. Up close, he was even more distinguished than I'd realized, silver hair perfectly combed, expensive suit that fit like it had been tailored specifically for him, the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. "Howard Blackstone," he said, extending his hand. "I was hoping to catch you before you left." The name hit me like a physical blow. Howard Blackstone had been CEO of Pinnacle Industries for 25 years before retiring 3 years ago. He'd built the company from a regional distributor into a national operation, and his picture still hung in the lobby downstairs. What the hell was he doing here on the day I was getting fired? "Mr. Blackstone," I managed. "I didn't realize you were still involved with the company." "I came back last week as an interim board advisor," he said. "Temporary position to help with the Delta integration." Friday night was my first company function in 3 years. The elevator arrived, but neither of us moved to get on. "How are you holding up?" he asked, and something in his tone suggested this wasn't just polite conversation. "Honestly, I've been better." He nodded slowly. "I saw what happened Friday night." Every second of it, my throat tightened. "Yeah, well, apparently what I saw and what other people saw were 2 different things, were they?" He studied my face for a moment. "Tell me, when Mrs. Hayes struck you, did you make any movement toward her? Any gesture that could be interpreted as threatening? No, I said immediately. I apologized. I didn't even raise my hands, and the collision with the waiter, that was accidental. Completely. We both moved at the same time. There were people all around us, no room to maneuver. Howard was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving my face. That matches what I observed, he said finally. Something in his voice made my pulse quicken. What are you saying? I'm saying I've seen Patricia Hayes in action before, and what happened Friday night troubled me enough that I've spent the weekend making some calls. Before I could ask what kind of calls, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked back at me. I need you to stay available over the next day or two, he said. There may be some developments you'll want to be aware of. What kind of developments? He gave me a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. The kind that happen when someone finally asks the right questions. The elevator doors had closed and reopened twice during our conversation. This time Howard stepped inside and I followed him. The Grandview Hotel has security cameras in all their event spaces, he said as we descended. It took some persuasion, but they've agreed to provide the footage from Friday night's dinner. I stared at him. Security footage. Actual video evidence of what had really happened. The board is meeting tomorrow morning, he continued. Closed session. They'll be reviewing the tape along with some other materials I've compiled. Other materials, employment records, performance reviews, and a rather interesting pattern of complaints involving Mrs. Hayes that have been systematically buried by management over the past several years. The elevator reached the ground floor, but Howard made no move to get out. This wasn't the first time, he said quietly. Patricia Hayes has a history of what we might charitably call difficult behavior at company events. The difference is that this time, someone with authority witnessed it firsthand. The doors opened onto the lobby, where Howard's picture looked down at us from the wall of former CEOs. He stepped out, then turned back to me. Go home, Garrison. Get some rest. And keep your phone on. I spent the next 36 hours in a strange state of suspended animation. Howard had told me to stay available, but available for what? I tried to keep busy with household projects, but my mind kept circling back to that security footage, wondering what it would show, whether it would be enough to change anything. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. Not Rachel from HR, but a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Wells, this is Jennifer Crawford from the board office. The board would like you to join a conference call this afternoon. I'll send you the access information. An hour later, I was sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open, staring at a screen full of black squares that slowly filled with faces. I recognized most of them board members I'd seen at company meetings over the years, senior executives, people whose decisions affected hundreds of employees, but who probably couldn't pick me out of a lineup under normal circumstances. Howard was there, of course, and Oliver, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Mr. Wells, said the board chair, a woman in her 60s whose voice carried the kind of authority that comes from decades of making difficult decisions. Thank you for joining us. This is a formal review of the incident that occurred at Friday night's company dinner. What followed was the most surreal hour of my professional life. They played the security footage, grainy black and white, but clear enough to show exactly what had happened. The collision with the waiter, the wine spill, my immediate attempt to help, Mrs. Hayes' violent response. Mr. Wells, the chair continued after the video ended, the board finds that you acted appropriately throughout this incident. The collision was clearly accidental, your response was professional, and Mrs. Hayes' actions were completely unwarranted. I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't even realized was tight. Furthermore, she said, our investigation has revealed a pattern of inappropriate behavior by Mrs. Hayes at company functions over the past several years. Behavior that was improperly handled by management. Oliver's face on the screen had gone pale. Effective immediately, the chair announced, you are reinstated to your position with full back pay. Additionally, the board is creating a new role, Senior Strategic Advisor, which comes with a 15% salary increase and direct board oversight. We'd like to offer that position to you. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to process what I was hearing. Howard leaned forward. Your innovations in supply chain management have saved this company over $12 million annually, Garrison. Your client relationships are irreplaceable. It's time that value was properly recognized. The call ended with handshakes through screens and promises of paperwork. When my laptop went dark, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, listening to the rain against the windows and feeling like the world had suddenly shifted back into focus. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Please call me. I need to explain. Oliver, I looked at it for a moment, then deleted it without responding. Some endings don't need explanations or apologies. Some endings are just quiet recognition that the truth, when it finally has a chance to speak, is louder than all the noise that tried to cover it up. I realized then that the difference between a career and a job isn't the work you do, it's having people in power who recognize the work you've already done.